I'm 28, single, obviously, but we'll get to that, and living in a one-bedroom apartment that's approximately the size of a shoebox. It's cozy, though. If by cozy you mean I can literally touch both walls if I stretch out my arms. But hey, it's mine. Well, mine and Steve's. Steve's my houseplant. Don't judge me. He's a fern, and he's somehow still alive despite my questionable gardening skills. I like to think it's because we have a special bond, but it's probably because he's low maintenance and I occasionally remember to water him. I work in marketing, which sounds fancy until you realise it mostly involves sending emails no one reads and attending meetings that could have been an email. It's not my dream job, but it pays the bills and funds my taco addiction, so I can't complain too much. Besides, I've got my routines. Taco Tuesdays are sacred. Weekends are for binge-watching terrible reality TV and yelling at the screen like I'm personally invested in the contestants' life choices. Spoiler, I'm not, but tell that to my rage when someone gets voted off The Bachelor. Now, let's talk about Jess. Jess is my best friend, my ride or die, my emotional support human. We've been inseparable since college, where we bonded over a mutual hatred for our dorm's mystery meat Mondays. You haven't lived until you've eaten something that's allegedly chicken, but tastes like regret and poor life choices. Jess and I survived that together, and it forged a friendship that's basically unbreakable. Also, I thought, Jess is like my twin, but cooler. We have the same taste in music, the same obsession with tacos, and the same ability to turn any situation into a comedy routine. She's the person I call at 2 a.m. when I'm overthinking my life choices, and she's the one who shows up with ice cream and wine when I've had a bad day. She's my person. Or at least she was. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. I've got my routines, my friends, and my questionable life choices. I'm content. Not thriving exactly, but not drowning either. It's fine. It's fine. But then Ethan happened. Ethan was my co-worker. Tall, charming, and with a smile that could probably cure seasonal depression. He's the kind of guy who looks like he stepped out of a rom-com, all perfectly tousled hair and effortless charm. I, on the other hand, look like I stepped out of a tornado. My hair has 2 settings, just woke up and electrocuted. My wardrobe is 80% sweatpants, and I have a habit of spilling things on myself, so naturally I was convinced Ethan was way out of my league. But more on that later. For now, just know this. My life was mediocre, but it was mine. And then, everything went sideways. So, grab some tacos and buckle up, because this is the story of how I thought Jess was my best friend, until she stole the love of my life. Or, at least, the guy I thought was the love of my life. Spoiler, he wasn't. But we'll get to that. Alright, so let's talk about Ethan. Ethan was the new guy at work, and from the moment he walked into the office, it was like the universe had decided to personally mess with me. He was tall, like stupid tall, with this effortless charm that made everyone in the room instantly like him. And his smile? Ugh. It was the kind of smile that could probably power a small city, or at least make you forget your own name for a second. Naturally, I was doomed from the start. Our first interaction was, predictably, a disaster. I was at the office coffee machine, trying to pour myself a latte, while mentally rehearsing how to say good morning without sounding like a malfunctioning robot. Ethan walks up, all confident and shiny like a rom-com hero, and says, "Hey, I'm Ethan. You must be new here." Now, let me stop you right there. I wasn't new. I'd been working there for 3 years. 3 years. But apparently, I'd made such a negligible impression that he assumed I was the newbie. Cool. Anyway, I panicked. Instead of saying something normal like, "Actually, I've been here a while," I blurted out, yeah, totally new. First day, fresh start. Who even are you?" Okay, I didn't say the last part, but I might as well have, because the look on his face was pure confusion. To make matters worse, I somehow managed to spill my latte all over his shoes. Not just a little spill either. We're talking full-on, I hope those were waterproof levels of disaster. He laughed it off though, which was either a testament to his good nature or proof that he was secretly a saint. "No worries," he said, grinning like I hadn't just committed a caffeinated crime. "I needed new shoes anyway." From there, our interactions became this awkward dance of me trying to be cool and failing spectacularly. I'd see him by the coffee machine and immediately forget how to form coherent sentences. Once, I accidentally called him Dave for no reason. Another time, I tripped over my own feet while trying to casually lean against a desk. It was like my body had decided to sabotage any chance I had at making a good impression. But here's the thing. Ethan didn't seem to mind. In fact, he seemed to find my clumsiness endearing. He'd laugh at my terrible jokes, ask me about my weekend plans, and even started saving me a seat in meetings. Slowly but surely, I started to think maybe, just maybe, he liked me too. Then came the day he asked me out. We were by the coffee machine. Shocker. And I was mid-ramble about my latest true crime podcast obsession when he casually said, "Hey, do you want to grab dinner sometime? Like, just the two of us?" I froze. My brain short-circuited. Did he just ask me out? Was this real life? Was I dreaming? Did I finally crack under the pressure of adulting and hallucinate the whole thing? Somehow, I managed to say yes without spilling anything on him. Progress. And just like that, we had a date. A real, actual date with Ethan, the guy who looked like he belonged in a cologne ad and somehow thought I was worth his time. I called Jess the second I got home, of course. She was my person, my sounding board, my hype woman. I told her everything. How he asked me out, how I didn't spill anything this time, how I was 90% sure I hadn't imagined the whole thing. She was thrilled for me. Or so she said. Looking back, maybe I should have noticed the little things. The way she'd pause just a beat too long before responding. The way her laughter sounded a little forced. But I didn't. I was too caught up in the excitement of it all, too busy imagining what it would be like to finally have someone like Ethan in my life. Little did I know, everything was about to go sideways. But hey, that's a story for later. So, the first date with Ethan. Let me tell you, I was a wreck. Like, full on, why did I think this was a good idea? Levels of nervous. I spent approximately 87% of the day leading up to it, overthinking everything. What should I wear? What if I spill something on myself? What if I accidentally call him Dave again? Yes, that was still haunting me. Enter Jess, my best friend and self-appointed dating coach. She showed up at my apartment 2 hours before the date with a giant tote bag full of clothes, makeup, and snacks. "We're doing this right," she declared, like she was preparing me for battle. And honestly, it kind of felt like it. We went through every outfit I owned, vetoing most of them for reasons like too boring, too try hard, or why do you even own this? Thanks, Jess. Eventually, we settled on a dress that was cute, but not too cute. Casual, but not too casual. You know, the kind of outfit that says, I put effort into this, but I'm also chill and definitely didn't spend 2 hours stressing about it. Then came the makeup. Jess insisted on doing it herself, which was both sweet and slightly terrifying. She's one of those people who can do a full face of makeup in 10 minutes and look like she just stepped out of a magazine. Me! I'm lucky if I can apply mascara without poking myself in the eye. As she worked her magic, I rambled about all the ways this date could go wrong. What if I run out of things to say? I asked, staring at my reflection like it might betray me at any moment. You won't, Jess said, blending eyeshadow with the precision of a Renaissance painter. You're hilarious. Just be yourself. What if I'm too myself and scare him off? Then, he's not the right guy, she said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. By the time she was done, I almost didn't recognize myself. My skin looked flawless, my eyes looked bigger, and my lips were some perfect shade of pink that I could never pull off on my own. "Wow," I said, turning to Jess. "You're a wizard!" She grinned. "I know. Now go get him, Tiger." The date itself was magical. Like butterflies in my stomach forget how to form coherent sentences magical. Ethan took me to this little Italian place that was all dim lighting and cozy booths. We talked for hours about work, about our favourite movies, about the time I accidentally locked myself out of my apartment wearing nothing but a bathrobe. Long story. He laughed at my jokes, asked thoughtful questions, and didn't even flinch when I knocked over my water glass. By the end of the night, I was floating. Like, actually floating. I'm pretty sure I walked home on a cloud. The second I got back to my apartment, I called Jess. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting for my update. "How was it?" she asked, her voice tinged with excitement. "Amazing," I gushed. "He's amazing. We talked for hours, and he's so easy to be around, and he didn't even care when I spilled water everywhere." "You spilled water?" "That's not the point. The point is, I think he really likes me." Jess laughed. "Of course he does. You're a catch." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and I went on more dates, and Jess was there for every step of it. She helped me pick out outfits, analyse texts, and plan the perfect birthday surprise for him. Spoiler, it involved tacos. Obviously. She was my hype woman, my sounding board, my partner in crime. But here's the thing about Jess. She was too involved. Looking back, I should have noticed the little things. The way she'd ask for every detail about Ethan, like she was cataloguing them for later. The way she'd laugh a little too hard at his jokes when we all hung out together. The way she'd always find a way to bring him up in conversation, even when we were talking about something completely unrelated. At the time, though, I didn't think anything of it. Jess was my best friend. She was just being supportive, right? Wrong. The weeks after that first date with Ethan were like something out of a rom-com montage. You know the kind. Soft lighting, upbeat music, and a series of perfectly curated moments that make you forget real life is usually way messier. For a while, I was living in that montage, and it was glorious. Ethan and I were texting constantly, like constantly. Morning texts, lunchtime check-ins, late night. "I can't sleep, what are you up to?" messages. It was the kind of attention I hadn't realised I'd been craving until I had it. He'd send me memes that made me laugh out loud at my desk, random photos of his dog, a golden retriever named Max, who was basically a fluffy angel, and even the occasional heart emoji. And let's be real, in 2023, a heart emoji is basically a marriage proposal. Our dates were just as perfect. He took me to a rooftop bar with a view of the city where we shared nachos and talked about our favourite childhood movies. His The Lion King, mine Mulan. We agreed to disagree. We went to a comedy show where I laughed so hard I snorted, and instead of being embarrassed, Ethan just grinned and said, "You're adorable." Adorable. I mean, come on. Then there was the time he surprised me with tickets to a food festival. A food festival. This man knew the way to my heart, and it was through a series of small plates and dessert samples. We spent the entire day eating our way through the event, and by the end of it, I was so full I could barely move. Ethan just laughed and said, "I've never seen someone so committed to tacos." "It's not just tacos," I corrected him, gesturing to the churro in my hand. "It's a lifestyle." He kissed me for the first time that night. It was one of those perfect, movie-worthy kisses, soft and sweet and just the right amount of fireworks. I floated home, convinced I'd found the real deal. Of course, I told Jess everything. Every detail, every text, every time Ethan used a heart emoji. She was my person, my sounding board, my hype woman. She'd listen to me ramble for hours, nodding along and offering advice like, "He's totally into you," or "You should invite him to that concert next month." But here's the thing. Looking back, there were little signs that something was off. Jess started cancelling plans last minute, claiming she was busy or tired. At first, I didn't think much of it. Life gets hectic, right? But then it kept happening. She'd bail on our weekly Taco Tuesdays, or she'd show up late and distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. Once, I caught her staring at her phone during one of our hangouts, a small smile playing on her lips. When I asked who she was texting, she quickly locked her phone and said, "No one, just work stuff." Work stuff, right. Still, I brushed it off. I was too caught up in the whirlwind of Ethan to notice the cracks forming in my friendship with Jess. Besides, she was still there for me when it mattered. She helped me pick out an outfit for Ethan's birthday dinner, a black dress that made me feel like $1,000,000, and even helped me bake him a cake. Spoiler, it was lopsided and slightly burnt, but Ethan said it was the best cake he'd ever had, bless him. For a while, everything felt perfect. Ethan was everything I'd ever wanted, attentive, funny, and genuinely kind. Jess was still my best friend, even if she was a little distant. I was happy, like truly, ridiculously happy. But you know what they say about things that seem too good to be true, right? Okay, so here's where things started to get weird. Not, oh, that's quirky weird, but wait, what's happening? Weird. At first, it was little things, tiny, almost imperceptible shifts that I brushed off because, hey, no one's perfect, right? But looking back, those little things were like breadcrumbs leading to a truth I wasn't ready to face. It started with Ethan's texts. They became less frequent. Where he used to send me good morning messages and random updates throughout the day, suddenly there were hours, sometimes even a full day, of silence. When he did text, it was short and to the point. "Hey, busy day, talk later." Or, "Sorry, swamped at work." At first, I told myself it was fine. People get busy, life happens. But then it kept happening. And when we were together, he seemed distracted. Like we'd be out to dinner and he'd spend half the time scrolling through his phone. Once, I caught him smiling at something on his screen. And when I asked what was so funny, he quickly locked his phone and said, "Oh, just a meme." A meme, right. Meanwhile, Jess was acting strange too. She'd always been the kind of friend who was there for everything, the good, the bad, and the downright embarrassing. But suddenly, she was busy all the time. Our weekly Taco Tuesdays? Cancelled. Our weekend Netflix marathons? Postponed. Even when we did hang out, she seemed distant, like her mind was somewhere else. Once, I called her after a particularly confusing day with Ethan. He'd cancelled our date last minute, claiming he had to work late, and I was feeling off. I needed my best friend. But when I called Jess, she answered with this weird, rushed energy. "Hey, what's up?" she said, her voice sounding strained. "Nothing," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Just wanted to talk. Ethan cancelled our date, and I'm kind of in my head about it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh," she said finally, "that sucks, but, work stuff happens. Don't overthink it." Don't overthink it. Easy for her to say. The final straw came one night when Ethan and I were supposed to meet for dinner. He texted me an hour before, saying something had come up and he couldn't make it. No explanation, no offer to reschedule, just, "Sorry, can't do dinner tonight. Rain check?" I was disappointed, obviously, but I tried to play it cool. "No worries," I texted back. "Next time." But then, as fate would have it, I ran into him later that night. I was out with another friend, and we decided to stop by this little wine bar we both loved, and there he was, Ethan, sitting at a corner table, laughing with someone I knew very well. Jess. They were sitting way too close, their heads tilted toward each other like they were sharing a secret. Jess was laughing at something he said, her hand resting on his arm in a way that felt intimate. My stomach dropped. My brain short-circuited. And then, because the universe has a sick sense of humour, Jess looked up and saw me. She waved. She waved. Like, this was a totally normal thing to do when you're out with your best friend's almost boyfriend. I stood there, frozen, as a million thoughts raced through my head. Was this a coincidence? Were they just friends? Was I overreacting? But deep down, I knew. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. It's a Friday night, and I'm out with my friend Claire, who's been trying to cheer me up after Ethan cancelled our date last minute. Again. We're at this cosy little wine bar we both love, the kind of place with dim lighting, exposed brick walls, and a playlist that's equal parts indie and nostalgic. I'm halfway through a glass of Pinot Noir, and finally starting to relax when I see them. Ethan and Jess. They're sitting at a corner table, heads close together, laughing like they're the stars of their own rom-com. Jess has her hand on his arm, and he's leaning in like whatever she's saying is the most fascinating thing he's ever heard. My stomach drops. My brain short-circuits. And then, because the universe clearly hates me, Jess looks up and sees me. She waves. She waves. Like, this is a totally normal thing to do when you're out with your best friend's almost boyfriend. I stand there frozen, as a million thoughts race through my head. Is this a coincidence? Are they just friends? Am I hallucinating? Maybe the wine is stronger than I thought. Claire, bless her, notices my expression and follows my gaze. Oh no, she says under her breath. Is that? Yep, I say, my voice sounding weirdly calm, despite the storm raging inside me. That's Ethan. And Jess. For a second, I consider turning around and walking out, pretending I didn't see them. But then Jess stands up and starts walking toward me, and I realise there's no escaping this. Hey, she says, her tone way too cheerful for the situation. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? What are you doing here with my almost boyfriend? That's what I want to say. Instead, I manage a week just hanging out with Claire. What about you? Jess glances back at Ethan, who's now staring at his wine glass like it holds the secrets of the universe. Oh, you know, she says, shrugging. We ran into each other and decided to grab a drink. Small world, right? Small world, right. Claire, sensing my impending meltdown, steps in. Well, we should get going, she says, grabbing my arm. Lots of wine to drink elsewhere. Jess nods, still smiling like this is no big deal. Okay, cool. Talk later? Sure, I say, my voice barely above a whisper. As we walk out of the bar, I feel like I'm in a daze. My mind is racing, trying to make sense of what just happened. Was it really a coincidence? Were they just catching up as friends? Or was there something more going on? Claire, ever the voice of reason, breaks the silence. Okay, that was weird. Like, really weird. You think? I say, my voice cracking. I mean, who just runs into someone and decides to grab a drink without telling their best friend? Especially when that someone is your almost boyfriend. She has a point. A very good point. But I'm not ready to admit it yet. Instead, I spend the rest of the night overanalyzing every detail, every word, every gesture. By the time I get home, I'm a mess. I try calling Jess, but she doesn't answer. I text Ethan, but he doesn't reply. So I do the only thing I can think of. I eat an entire pint of ice cream while watching The Notebook and crying like my life depends on it. The next morning, I wake up with a headache and a sinking feeling in my chest. Something's not right. Something's very, very wrong. The morning after the wine bar incident, I woke up with a pounding headache and a pit in my stomach that no amount of coffee could fix. My phone was eerily silent. No texts from Ethan, no calls from Jess. It was like they had both vanished into thin air, leaving me to deal with the emotional fallout alone. By midday, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. So, I did what any rational, emotionally unstable person would do. I texted Jess and asked if we could talk. She replied almost immediately, which was both a relief and a red flag. "Sure," she said. "Your place or mine?" I chose mine, mostly because I didn't trust myself not to cry in public, and also because I wanted the home field advantage. When Jess showed up, she looked different. Her usual confidence was replaced by something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Nervousness? Either way, it didn't sit right with me. We sat on my couch, a bowl of pretzels between us like some kind of sad peace offering. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. The silence was deafening, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Finally, I broke the ice. "So," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "what's going on with you and Ethan?" Jess froze, a pretzel halfway to her mouth. She set it down slowly and took a deep breath. "Look," she said, "it's not what you think." "Really?" I said, my tone sharper than I intended. Because from where I was sitting, it looked like you were on a date with my almost boyfriend. Jess winced. "It wasn't a date. We just ran into each other and decided to grab a drink. That's all." "That's all?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Jess, you've been acting weird for weeks. Cancelling plans, dodging my calls, and now this. You expect me to believe it's just a coincidence?" She looked down at her hands, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said quietly. "Well, you did," I shot back, my voice cracking. "You're my best friend. Or at least, I thought you were. How could you do this to me?" Jess sighed and ran a hand through her hair. "It just happened," she said. "We started talking and we connected. I didn't plan for it to happen, but it did." "Connected?" I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. "What does that even mean? You connected so much that you had to sneak around behind my back?" "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't help how I felt." "And what about Ethan?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Did he connect with you too? Was he just stringing me along this whole time?" Jess didn't answer, which was answer enough. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My best friend and the guy I thought was the love of my life had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "I'm sorry," Jess said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen." "But it did," I said, my voice breaking, "and now I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The room fell silent, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Jess looked like she wanted to say more, but I couldn't handle it. I stood up, my legs trembling, and pointed to the door. "I think you should go," I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. Jess hesitated for a moment, then nodded and stood up. She grabbed her bag and walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice barely audible. And then she was gone. I sank back onto the couch, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My best friend was gone. Ethan was gone. And I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart. After Jess left, I did what any self-respecting, heartbroken person would do. I wallowed. Like, really wallowed. I'm talking sweatpants, unwashed hair, and a steady diet of ice cream and regret. It wasn't pretty, but hey, neither was my life at that point. The first few days were the worst. I called in sick to work, ignored my phone, and basically turned my apartment into a cave of despair. Steve, my Fern, was my only companion, and even he looked a little judgmental. Okay, maybe I was projecting, but still. I spent most of my time on the couch, binge-watching rom-coms and crying at the happy endings. It was like emotional self-sabotage, but with a side of popcorn. Every time the couple on screen kissed, I'd think about Ethan and Jess and feel like I'd been punched in the gut. I also went through the classic stages of heartbreak, though not necessarily in order. There was anger, lots of yelling at my TV, denial, maybe it was all a bad dream, bargaining if I just text Ethan, maybe he'll explain everything, and depression. See sweatpants and ice cream. Acceptance was nowhere to be found. One night, I decided to clean out my closet as a form of therapy. Big mistake. I found the dress I wore on my first date with Ethan, the one Jess helped me pick out. I also found a pair of his socks that he'd left at my place weeks ago. Why do guys always leave socks everywhere? Is it a territorial thing? I held the socks for a minute, debating whether to burn them or use them as a makeshift stress ball. In the end, I threw them in the trash, along with the dress and a few other relics of my failed almost relationship. It felt symbolic, like I was purging the past. But mostly, it just made me sad. Food became my emotional crutch. I ordered takeout every night, alternating between tacos, obviously, and Chinese food. I even tried baking cookies at one point, but they came out burnt and lumpy, which felt like a metaphor for my life. My friends tried to help, bless them. Claire called every day, offering to come over and cheer me up, which usually meant wine and a lot of ranting about how Ethan and Jess were the worst. My co-worker Sarah sent me memes and gifs to make me laugh. Even my mum got in on the action, texting me inspirational quotes like, "When one door closes, another one opens." Thanks, Mum. Very helpful. But no matter what anyone said or did, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. It was like a dark cloud hanging over me, raining on my parade 24/7. I kept replaying the confrontation with Jess in my head, wondering if I'd said the right things or if I'd been too harsh. Spoiler, I hadn't. The worst part was the loneliness. I'd spent so much time with Jess and Ethan that I didn't know what to do with myself now that they were gone. My apartment felt too quiet, my routines felt empty, and my life felt smaller. But then, one night, something shifted. I was lying on the couch, halfway through a pint of mint chocolate chip, when I had a moment of clarity. Or maybe it was a sugar high. Hard to say. I realised I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't let Ethan and Jess take up so much space in my head. I deserved better. It wasn't a full-blown epiphany, more like a tiny spark of hope. But it was enough to make me sit up and take notice. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop wallowing and start rebuilding. The night I decided to stop wallowing wasn't some grand, cinematic moment. There was no dramatic music swelling in the background, no sudden burst of sunlight breaking through the clouds. It was just me, sitting on my couch in my sweatpants, staring at the empty pint of mint chocolate chip ice cream in my hand, thinking, this is pathetic. And you know what? It was. I'd spent weeks moping around, letting Ethan and Jess take up way too much space in my head. I turned my apartment into a shrine to heartbreak, complete with takeout containers and tear-stained tissues. But that night, something inside me snapped. I was done. Done with the pity parties, done with the endless loop of what-ifs, and done with letting two people who didn't deserve me dictate my happiness. So, I made a decision. It was time to level up. The first step was reclaiming my space. I deep-cleaned my apartment, scrubbing away every trace of my wallowing phase. I threw out the takeout containers, washed the dishes that had been piling up in the sink, and even gave Steve the fern a much-needed trim. He looked relieved. It felt symbolic, like I was clearing out the emotional clutter along with the physical mess. Next, I tackled my routine. I started waking up earlier, forcing myself out of bed even when all I wanted to do was hit snooze and hide under the covers. I traded my sweatpants for actual clothes and swapped my nightly ice cream binges for something slightly healthier. Okay, fine, it was still ice cream, but in smaller portions. Baby steps. I also decided to try new things. I signed up for a salsa class, which was equal parts exhilarating and humiliating. I have the coordination of a drunk giraffe, but I figured if I could survive heartbreak, I could survive a few awkward dance moves. Spoiler, I was terrible. Like, really terrible. But it didn't matter because I was doing something for me, and that felt good. Then came Taco. Yes, Taco the dog. I'd been thinking about getting a pet for a while, and one day, on a whim, I visited a local animal shelter. The second I saw him, a scruffy little terrier mix with one ear that flopped over, I knew he was the one. He wagged his tail so hard his whole body wiggled, and when I knelt down to pet him, he licked my face like I was the best thing he'd ever seen. I adopted him on the spot. Taco became my emotional support buddy, my partner in crime, and the reason I had to get out of bed every morning. Dogs don't care if you're heartbroken, they just want breakfast and belly rubs. He also gave me a sense of purpose, something I hadn't realised I'd been missing. Work was another area where I decided to step up. I threw myself into my projects, taking on tasks I normally would have avoided. I even volunteered to lead a big presentation, which was way outside my comfort zone. But you know what? I nailed it. My boss was impressed, my co-workers were supportive, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. Of course, there were still moments when the hurt crept back in. Nights when I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things could have gone so wrong. But instead of letting those moments consume me, I'd remind myself of how far I'd come. I wasn't the same person I'd been a few weeks ago. I was stronger, braver, and more determined than ever to live my best life. And you know what? It felt amazing. While I was busy levelling up my life, Jess and Ethan were, well, let's just say they weren't thriving. Karma, it turns out, is a queen, and she was working overtime. It started with little things. I'd hear snippets of gossip from mutual friends, how Jess and Ethan were constantly arguing, how they seemed off whenever they were out together. At first, I tried not to pay attention. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing I cared. But then, the stories got harder to ignore. One night, Claire called me, her voice buzzing with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "I just saw Jess and Ethan at that new Italian place downtown, and let's just say, it wasn't exactly a romantic dinner." "What happened?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even though my curiosity was through the roof. "They were fighting," Claire said, like full-on arguing. Jess looked furious, and Ethan was just sitting there looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. It was awkward for everyone in the restaurant. I couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of satisfaction. Not because I wanted them to be miserable, okay, maybe a little, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Their relationship was built on shaky ground. Then came the social media drama. Jess, who had always been private about her personal life, started posting cryptic quotes about trust and betrayal. Ethan, on the other hand, went radio silent, which was unusual for someone who used to post every other day. It didn't take a genius to figure out that things weren't going well. The final straw came when I ran into Ethan at work. We hadn't spoken since the wine bar incident, and I'd been avoiding him like the plague. But one day, we ended up in the break room at the same time. He looked rough. His usual charm was gone, replaced by a tired, defeated expression. "Hey," he said, his voice hesitant. "Hey," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was an awkward silence before he finally spoke. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Sorry? For what, exactly?" He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "For how things ended. For hurting you. It wasn't fair, and I regret it." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the truth was, his apology felt too little, too late. "Thanks," I said simply, "but I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually." He nodded, looking relieved, but also a little sad. "I'm glad to hear that." As for Jess, our paths didn't cross much after the confrontation. but I heard through the grapevine that she and Ethan had broken up. Apparently, their connection wasn't as strong as they'd thought. Shocker. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd both betrayed me, and in the end, they'd betrayed each other too. It was like a soap opera, but without the dramatic music and slow-motion camera angles. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a tiny bit of satisfaction watching their relationship crumble. But mostly, I just felt free, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. They weren't my problem anymore, and that was the best revenge of all. While Jess and Ethan were busy imploding, I was busy thriving. It's funny how life works sometimes. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, you realise you've actually been given a shovel to dig yourself out. And dig I did. The first big change was my confidence. I'd always been the kind of person who second-guessed everything, from my outfit choices to my career decisions. But after everything that happened, I realised I didn't have time for that anymore. Life was too short to waste on self-doubt. So I started trusting myself more. If I wanted to wear bright yellow sneakers to work, I wore them. If I had an idea in a meeting, I spoke up. And you know what? People noticed. My boss even pulled me aside one day to tell me how much I'd grown. Then there was Taco. My scruffy little terrier mix had become my partner in crime, my emotional support buddy, and the reason I had to get out of bed every morning. Dogs don't care if you're heartbroken. They just want breakfast and belly rubs. He also gave me a sense of purpose, something I hadn't realised I'd been missing. Taking care of him forced me to be more responsible and present, and in return, he gave me unconditional love. It was a fair trade. I also started saying yes to things I normally would have avoided. When my coworker invited me to a networking event, I went and actually enjoyed myself. When my neighbour asked if I wanted to join her book club, I said yes, even though I hadn't read a book in months. Turns out, wine and book discussions are a great combination. And when my salsa instructor suggested I try a more advanced class, I didn't hesitate. Sure, I still had the coordination of a drunk giraffe, but I was having fun, and that was what mattered. Work was another area where I decided to step up. I threw myself into my projects, taking on tasks I normally would have avoided. I even volunteered to lead a big presentation, which was way outside my comfort zone. But you know what? I nailed it. My boss was impressed, my co-workers were supportive, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. But the biggest change was how I saw myself. I wasn't the same person I'd been a few months ago. I was stronger, braver, and more determined than ever to live my best life. I'd stopped waiting for someone else to make me happy and started doing it myself. And it felt amazing. Of course, there were still moments when the hurt crept back in. Nights when I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things could have gone so wrong. But instead of letting those moments consume me, I'd remind myself of how far I'd come. I wasn't the same person I'd been a few weeks ago. I was stronger, braver, and more determined than ever to live my best life. And you know what? It felt amazing. Months had passed since the wine bar incident, and life had settled into a new rhythm. I was thriving in ways I hadn't thought possible, excelling at work, dancing badly, at salsa class, and spending my evenings with Taco, who had become the centre of my world. Jess and Ethan were no longer a constant presence in my thoughts, though their absence still lingered like a faint scar. Then, one afternoon, Jess texted me. "Hey," the message read, "can we talk? I think we need to clear the air." I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting into knots. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to leave the past where it belonged. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger and braver over the past few months, knew I needed closure. So I agreed to meet her. We met at a park, a neutral space where neither of us could claim home field advantage. Jess looked different, tired, maybe even a little worn down. Her usual confidence was muted, and she fidgeted with her coffee cup as we sat on a bench. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice tentative. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. You said you wanted to talk. She took a deep breath, like she was steeling herself for what came next. I know I messed up, she began. What I did, it was wrong. I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. I didn't plan for any of it to happen, she said, her voice cracking. But that's no excuse. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. I should have told you how I felt instead of sneaking around behind your back. Why didn't you? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Jess looked down at her hands, her shoulders slumping. I was scared, she admitted. Scared of losing you, scared of what you'd think of me. And in the end, I lost you anyway. Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with regret. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Jess had been my best friend, my person, and seeing her like this, broken and vulnerable, was hard. But I couldn't forget the pain she'd caused. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally, but it doesn't change what happened. You betrayed me, Jess. You and Ethan both. And that's not something I can just forget. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed you to know how sorry I am. I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. I forgive you, I said, surprising even myself. But that doesn't mean things can go back to the way they were. I can't trust you like I used to, and I don't think I ever will. Jess wiped her eyes, nodding again. I understand. I hope someday you can be happy. You deserve it. I am happy, I said, and for the first time I realized it was true. I've moved on, Jess, and I think it's time you did too. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Then Jess stood up, her coffee cup still clutched in her hands. Take care of yourself, she said softly. You too, I replied, and with that, she walked away. I stayed on the bench for a while, watching the world go by. It felt like the end of an era, but also the beginning of something new. I'd faced my past, made peace with it, and come out stronger on the other side. As I walked home, Taco greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, wagging his tail so hard his whole body wiggled. I scooped him up, laughing as he licked my face. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would take me next.